Welcome to the Vibing with LadyVee podcast. I'm your host, Valencia, aka LadyVee. If this is the first time you're joining in, thank you for joining me. And for those of you that are repeat viewers, welcome back. My endeavors are to bring to you some intriguing stories from around the world and some important lessons of love that you can use either now or in the very near future. So, from my heart to yours, let's go. Today on the podcast, I have with me again a repeat guest, Fillmore Denny. Welcome, Fillmore, to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I think a lot of people do not know that you're actually my brother,
Yeah.
Fillmore Denny. And the second thing that people may not know is that you are a pilot.
Also correct.
The family is very proud of you for becoming a pilot, and you've been doing this for quite some time, and we're happy to be able to bring to you the topic of aviation safety culture. This is a subject that's near and dear to Fillmore Denny. Can you tell me why that's so near and dear to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It started actually a long time ago. I was 11 years old when I got bitten by the flying bug, so to speak. It was an aircraft that left a mark on me, Beach Baron, that flew very low over a hill that all the kids, just at the time, had just gotten out of school, going over the hill. All of a sudden, this airplane came screaming down, the the valley, and just gave us a beautiful view of the underside of that airplane. It's the closest I've ever been in my life for the first time to an airplane. It must have been at least, it was less than 50 feet above where I was on the hill. So it was really impressive, and it left a mark on me, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I got a hold of Encyclopedia A by accident after we were rearranging the school actually for examination, and I discovered while we were moving all the books around, I discovered Encyclopedia A, and I looked through it and I saw the aircraft, and right away, well, there was no going back because I know I marked that book and it lived in my desk. So I keep reading on all the subject matter related to aviation, from the beginnings, so histories to, a lot of the subject matter like meteorology and aerodynamics, navigation for the first time in a structural manner. I was reading about it and I was very impressed. So, that was my first start in aviation. And from then on, I started buying flying magazines when I discovered them and so on. So I was self-motivated. Nobody was there to help me or guide me or give me advice. I just knew that's what I wanted to do, and I set out to accomplish that task, right? So that was my start in aviation. So aviation safety culture, I came through the growth of aviation at the height of the safety, what I like to call safety conscious revolution. So introduction of CRM, or corporate resource management, and introducing the psychology behind working together as a team with a very complex system. And in an aviation system, it was also complex. So conforming to a safety standards and understanding the inner workings of those standards was one of my main, how shall I say now, it was very dear to me. And I've watched that over the years, and I follow developments in aviation that was associated to new findings because of accidents, mistakes people made, of course, the human factor, you hear that a lot, or human error. So again, safety culture is very important to me, and my training and emphasis was, had this at the core, not just to pass an exam or to pass or the license. I, wanted to understand integrally how everything comes together, and it was, I was constantly in my book accomplishing that. Nobody was forcing to me. It wasn't a degree program. It was something that I thought was important, and understanding it and making it a part of you, assimilating that information was critical, to having a safety attitude.
I understand that when you were younger, you actually built an airplane. Is that true?
I built a model plane.
And how old were you?
Yeah, for the first time, learning and applying all the principles that I'd learned from reading the encyclopedia. I must have been maybe 12, I think, 12 or 13. And yeah, I basically got aluminum cans and using wax from candles and duct tape and wheels that cannibalized from other toys. And it put together and actually had an engine that was wired up with a battery that had an operating propeller. So I actually and painted it and everything like that. It actually looked like a Japanese Zero, except it's a cross between a Zero and a Piper agriculture aircraft. It had that kind of look. I didn't never seen one before, but that's what I made. That's what I came up with. So yeah, I was testing it in the yard and everything, and it just so happened to my biology teacher actually saw it operating as he was going up the hill. He, saw the engine turning over, and he just stood there at the fence and shake his head because everybody knew I had an obsession with airplanes. And so that was my graduation project, putting everything I learned together with the theory, with the design of the wing, and everything like that to have what looks like a functioning an airplane. It wasn't flyable at the time; it was a demonstration model. But yeah, I was able to do that without any guidance, without any help, without any YouTube or anything like that. But this is something that with the drive I had in me, was able to do this. So
And
yeah,
this dream of yours began in St. Vincent. And let's take a look at a video of you actually flying. Let's take a look at this camera over here.
there you go.
Thank you for that. Phil, can you briefly describe one of the pathways to becoming a proficient pilot and the pathways that maybe you've taken in the past as well?
Yeah. One of the key things about aviation, of course, is a big thing is attitude. Anybody, whether it be a child like I was at 11, wanted to be a pilot. Number one, there are so many different piloting jobs, right? So if you gear yourself towards an airline career, or you gain yourself towards just a corporate, corporate flying, or just general aviation, you want to be able to fly your own airplane, your own aircraft. All these are critical in knowing how you start. So if you wanted to be an airline pilot, most people, the pathway they take, of course, out of high school, they would also maybe pick a school that has an association with a college that has an aviation program, right? So as a mature student, or as kids that are young, can start in the Air Cadets, right? You can learn, you put your kids in that program, in the Air Cadets program. It will teach them and give them all the basics they need to bring them to a point in their life that they can transition to general aviation or wherever they wanted to go. But the key thing is attitude, because nothing comes easy. And flying, learning to fly, and paying for flight lessons is very challenging. So you have to have the fortitude to stay the course, study, do well on the exam because you will be tested. So you have to make sure that you understand the materials, not just memorize them, because you will be tested on the Transport Canada exams. When you sit them, it's 3 hours long, and you have to get, in some cases, 60 or 70% minimum to pass. So there are several subjects, and you have to make sure you master those. But preparing for that stage, at an earlier stage, right out of high school, takes the right kind of attitude to do that. One pathway, as you follow that too, was an airline career. Now, most guys, after your first certification as a private pilot, you build up. The next step you want to do is have your commercial pilot's license. The commercial pilot license right after your private license, because your commercial will now lead you to do a flight instructor rating after you finish that commercial, so you can get to work. Because at this point, it's critical to bill hours. So you're trying to bill your hours. So you come in with 200 hours. You want to bill yourself as quickly as possible while you're flight instructing to your 1,500 hour mark, to be hired by an airline in most cases. Now, they vary that because of the shortage of pilots. They may take less than 1,500 hours, but that was the gold standard at the time. So to achieve that 1,500 hours, you need to be a lot of guys get into flight instructing, and then to build up the hours in the kind of aircraft that they would need to apply to an airline, which is basically, I mean, it's great having single engine training hours for experience, but it can also hurt you if you have too much of those hours, because employers are looking for multi-engine time. It's very expensive. The only way to get that a lot of times is to become a flight instructor at a school that has multi-engine aircraft that you can actually teach. So these are pathways that are taken by the general population of general aviation pilots on their way to becoming an airline pilot. A lot of them become going to bush flying, building their time towards that airline career. A lot of them go into corporate flying if they are well connected, and you can get in with after you get your commercial license. You can probably sit as a first officer in a Cessna, Citation, or Pilatus 24. All of those will gear you towards maybe towards the career path that you've chosen. Now, everybody looks at the airline pilots and they look at, oh, this is a gold standard. I want to be when they think of being a pilot, they think of an airline pilot. But there's private pilot. So that means you can fly your own airplane if you have an airplane, or somebody who have an airplane. You can bill hours that way, right? So that's being a private pilot. You can be a corporate pilot, which is not an airline pilot, not necessarily, but you can fly for a flight school, maybe that has an airline component to it. So there are benefits. You got to look at all these choices as you are proceeding through your flying career. So you have to choose it carefully. Myself, I didn't have a lot of connections. I basically just flew. I also didn't have a lot of money, so for my time, it took a long time for me, and I dragged it out over a few years because I used to work, and then during my holidays, I'll take my holiday pay and actually go to flight school. And when I first started, I was working a job for $7 an hour, so I can go and pay for flying lessons at $130 an hour. So if you do the math, see how long I had to work just to get my private and commercial. So my pace was a little bit different. So as a result of that, I experienced a lot of uh, the flight instructors that taught me came from the military, so they had a different discipline level. So I benefited from that. So all the pilots that came, all the flight instructors that came through that taught me, I benefited from their experience because they were very disciplined, came from the military. Like today, you'll have a kid that come through, have a flight instructor rating, and he's there teaching you, but he has no real solid life experience in the field to bring to you. So I benefited from that. So as a result of that, it created in me a safety culture that was highly disciplined, and I just, feel very passionate about that.
Absolutely. And, today we can go on TikTok and we can see maybe a 10-year-old flying an airplane. Everyone's flying an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit more about just going back to in your times before the iPads, before technology? Tell me a little bit about what would be some of let's say there's someone who's watching right now,
Mm-hmm.
or a young person who wants to be a pilot. What would be some of the top three maybe books that I might need to read, or what do I need to do? How do I get started? What would be your top three books, maybe?
Yeah. One of the most important things that I would, most important books I'd recommend to anybody is a book called From the Ground Up. And we don't have a copy of that right here now. But From the Ground Up will teach you all you need to know to start flight training, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it gets cover topics such as navigation, aerodynamics. It also topics with communication, and air traffic control, the Canadian airspace system, because I fly in Canada. Also, the U.S. have a similar, which is their I think it's the AIP or the RAC, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And all that's a regulatory book. So in there, it teaches you, it gives you all the prerequisites, right?
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And can you give us an example of another book that folks might need to get into, or young people might need to get into in the event you um, are interested in becoming
Yeah,
a pilot?
absolutely. One of the books that's I guess it's a premier reference manual that every pilot is familiar with, and it's this book in Canada. It's a flight training manual. Because there's two components towards training, like in Canada. Of course, there's a flight component, and then there's a ground component, right? So you go to ground school, and you put in a minimum amount of hours in ground school. That is a requirement, Transport Canada, for getting your license. And then when you do the flight portion of your training, the flight manual is pretty much the Bible of everything you'll be required to cover in the flight training portion of the curriculum. So basically, a lot of guys, I mean, I did the way I did. I got the books, I read it. It was with me all the time to be familiar with the content. You're not trying to memorize everything, but you want to know what's in there. So when you ask a question and when you're studying, you can actually go and you'll be familiar. And everything is structured so that it flows. So one topic leads into another. Like, for example, navigation, right? You have to have an understanding of certain topics in navigation that translate directly to your flight training as you do a cross country flight. So it's modular in that one subject builds on another. So you have to do and retain the knowledge from one subject as you go along to the next subject. It translates directly. So I would not recommend a person who is not involved directly or enrolled in a flight training program to acquire books on their own and just start reading. Number one, what it does, it creates, because we have a structure as flight instructors to teach a certain way according to Transport Canada standards. And when you go, like, jump ahead 2 or 3 topics that's not relevant to your learning the first topic, you can actually cause yourself to spend more money, because now you have to unlearn things and learn it correctly again. So it's good to be familiar with it, read it for information purpose, but you should actually, it should go along with a training curriculum, right, as well as you do that. So, and then you get more engaged in the subject matter at the time, because there's so much to cover. I believe there's 22 exercises, flight exercises, that has to be covered in the book, and each one of them, on average, it may take an hour, it may take you more than an hour, right? So the minimum amount of hours at the time was 45 hours for your private license. So within that time, you have to do a certain portion of that in ground school. So you're actually gonna, so now you can do that online. The technology has changed today, where when I was doing it, I had to hit the books all the time, right? You have to remember when you present yourself in that environment, all that information has to be in the top. And if you have other issues that are interfering, it's going to delay your training. It's going to cost you more money, right? Because you're not going to be able to transition to the next topic as easily when you start forgetting stuff. Because when you go in the airplane and start demonstrating, you have to demonstrate to a certain standard. If you're not there, the instructor would go back over your previous lesson to make sure that knowledge, right, is there to make the transition. And if it's not there, you're going to have to put in more time trying to get there. And that's where it's frustrating a lot of times, and a lot of guys walk away to get fed up, and they lose focus.